January 22, 1991. Somewhere in the western Iraqi desert, 300 kilometers behind enemy lines, three Land Rover 110s painted an impossible shade of pink roll to a stop on a gravel plateau overlooking a major highway. The vehicles look wrong. They look exposed. They look like they should be visible from orbit. Each one carries more firepower than a light infantry platoon. Twin-mounted machine guns, Milan anti-tank missiles, American Stinger surface-to-air missiles jury-rigged to roof mounts. Enough ammunition to fight a battalion, and they are painted pink, not camouflage tan, not desert brown. Pink, like a child's toy truck left in the sun too long. The crews are British Special Air Service. Their mission is to hunt mobile Scud missile launchers across 120,000 square kilometers of open desert. Iraqi forces are looking for them. Coalition aircraft are looking for targets, and these men are driving vehicles that in daylight look like they should glow in the dark. Then the sun begins to set, and the pink Land Rovers disappear. Within 2 hours, they would destroy an Iraqi communications facility, ambush a supply convoy, and vanish into terrain where heavier coalition vehicles could not follow. The Iraqis called them ghosts. The SAS called them Pink Panthers. And for 6 weeks in early 1991, they rewrote the rules of desert warfare with a paint scheme that should never have worked. To understand why the British Special Air Service was driving pink trucks through the Iraqi desert, you need to go back to 1941, North Africa. The original SAS, founded by David Stirling, conducted long-range desert patrols in modified Willys Jeeps and Chevrolet trucks behind Axis lines. They learned 3 principles. First, mobility is survival. Heavy armor attracts attention and restricts movement. Light vehicles operating at the edge of their range in terrain the enemy considers impassable own the battlefield. Second, firepower compensates for protection. A vehicle that can destroy the enemy at 2,000 meters does not need armor to survive contact at 200 meters. Third, camouflage is context-dependent. What hides you at noon kills you at dusk. The paint scheme that worked in North Africa in 1942 was a specific shade of pink. Not bright pink, not pastel. A sun-faded, dust-absorbed, light rose tone that matched the color of the desert landscape during the golden hour before sunset and the blue hour after dawn, when most ground movement occurred. When visibility was long but color perception was compressed, British military chemists documented the formula. It was filed, and for 50 years it sat in an archive. Then Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. In August 1990, coalition planners identified a strategic problem. Iraq possessed Soviet-made Scud-B ballistic missiles, mobile launchers that could strike Israel or Saudi Arabia with chemical warheads. If Israel was hit, it might retaliate, fracturing the Arab coalition. The Scuds had to be destroyed before launch. American F-15E Strike Eagles and A-10 Warthogs flew hundreds of sorties searching for launchers. They found almost nothing. The Scuds launched at night from highways, wadis, or pre-surveyed firing points, then disappeared into culverts or under camouflage nets before dawn. Air power alone could not solve the problem. The mission went to Special Operations Forces, American Delta Force, and British SAS. The concept was simple. Insert small teams deep behind Iraqi lines in vehicles light enough to avoid detection, fast enough to evade pursuit, and armed heavily enough to destroy anything they encountered. Live off the vehicles for weeks. Navigate by the stars. Report Scud launches. Kill the launchers when possible. The SAS selected the Land Rover 110. The long-wheelbase military variant of the Defender. It was not fast, it was not armored, it was not sophisticated. Maximum road speed was 100 kilometers per hour. Protection was sheet metal. The engine was a 3.5-liter Rover V8 producing 134 horsepower. But it had 3 qualities that mattered. First, it was mechanically simple. An SAS trooper could rebuild the entire drivetrain in a desert wadi with hand tools. Second, it had range. With auxiliary fuel tanks mounted in the rear load bed, a Land Rover 1110 could travel 1,100 kilometers without refueling. Third, it was light. Combat weight was approximately 2,800 kilograms. It could cross terrain where heavier vehicles bogged down. Then came the modifications. The SAS removed everything unnecessary: doors, windscreen, roof. The vehicle became an open skeletal frame. Roll bars were welded to protect the crew if the vehicle overturned. Weapons mounts were fabricated from steel tubing. A pintle-mounted GPMG, the British 7.62mm general-purpose machine gun, was installed in the front passenger position. A second GPMG, or a Browning M250 caliber heavy machine gun, was mounted on a rotating post behind the driver. Some vehicles carried American Mk-19 automatic grenade launchers. Some carried Milan wire-guided anti-tank missiles. A few carried Stinger surface-to-air missiles, repurposed from their intended role to engage ground targets or low-flying helicopters. Ammunition was stored in every available space: belt-fed machine gun rounds in steel cans, grenades in webbing, claymore mines strapped to the exterior, medical supplies, water jerry cans, ration packs, cam nets, all lashed to the frame. Communications equipment included TCBE survival radios and encrypted SATCOM sets for calling in airstrikes. Navigation was by GPS, then a new and temperamental technology, backed up by paper maps and celestial navigation. Some teams carried portable Magellan GPS units weighing 1.5 kilograms that drained batteries in hours. Others navigated by compass and the stars, the same way the long-range desert group had in 1942, and they painted the vehicles pink. The specific shade was called lightstone, a carryover from the World War II formula. In full daylight, it looked absurd, exposed, unmilitary. But at dawn and dusk, when the sun sat low on the horizon and the desert took on hues of rose, salmon, and pale orange, the pink Land Rovers became part of the landscape. Human eyes, evolved to detect movement and contrast, struggled to separate the vehicles from the surrounding terrain. Iraqi patrols reported shadows that moved but could not be fixed. Helicopter pilots reported ground clutter that disappeared when they adjusted altitude. The pink was not invisibility, it was ambiguity. At the ranges and lighting conditions where engagements occurred, it delayed recognition long enough for the SAS to shoot first. The first Pink Panther patrols crossed into Iraq on January 20, 1991, 2 days after the air war began. Their operational area was the Western Desert, a region the size of England, largely unpopulated, cut by wadis and gravel pans, dominated by a single highway running from Baghdad to Jordan. 3 vehicle patrols, 9 to 12 men, 4 to 6 weeks of supplies. Rules of engagement were simple. Avoid contact unless mission critical. If compromise is inevitable, destroy the threat and extract. Never let the vehicle be captured intact. One of the earliest engagements occurred on January 24th. A Pink Panther patrol encountered an Iraqi Army communications post, a small compound with radio masts and 2 trucks. The SAS had been observing Scud movement along the highway. This post was reporting their presence. The decision was immediate. The patrol closed to 800 meters under the cover of a small ridgeline. The vehicles went line abreast. At 0420 hours, still dark, they opened fire. The GPMG on the lead vehicle destroyed the radio mast with a sustained burst. The Bot 50 caliber on the second vehicle raked the compound buildings. The third vehicle launched a Milan missile into one of the trucks. The explosion was visible for kilometers. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. The SAS extracted south into terrain too broken for wheeled Iraqi vehicles to follow. No coalition casualties. The communications post ceased transmitting. Then came the mission that would define the Pink Panthers. Bravo 20. On January 22nd, an 8-man SAS patrol was inserted by helicopter 300 kilometers northwest of Baghdad, with orders to cut fiber optic communication lines and observe Scud activity along a major supply route. The patrol was on foot. No vehicles. The terrain was assessed as too open, too cold, too exposed for vehicular operations. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Within 48 hours, the patrol was compromised. Iraqi forces closed in. The temperature dropped below freezing at night. The men were carrying 90-kilogram packs on foot in terrain where a Pink Panther patrol could have maintained mobility and firepower. 3 men were captured. 1 died of hypothermia. 4 escaped across 300 kilometers to the Syrian border. The SAS learned what the long-range desert group had known 50 years earlier. In the desert, the vehicle is not a liability. It is life support. Meanwhile, other Pink Panther patrols were operating as designed. On February 3rd, a patrol designated Bravo 30, vehicular-mounted, engaged an Iraqi convoy transporting supplies toward a suspected Scud launcher site. The convoy consisted of 6 trucks, 2 fuel tankers, and an escort of BTR-60 armored personnel carriers. The SAS patrol positioned on high ground with overlapping fields of fire. The engagement was surgical. The lead Pink Panther destroyed the lead BTR with a Milan missile at 1,200 meters. The second vehicle engaged the fuel tankers with 50 caliber incendiary rounds. Both tankers exploded. The third vehicle suppressed infantry dismounting from the trucks. The convoy was annihilated in under 3 minutes. The SAS extracted before Iraqi QRF helicopters arrived. By mid-February, Iraqi forces had learned to fear any engagement with unidentified light vehicles in open terrain. Pink Panther patrols reported that Iraqi truck convoys, upon seeing dust trails at range, would halt and disperse rather than risk contact. The vehicles themselves became a psychological weapon. The Scud hunt was less decisive. The mobile launchers were hard to find, harder to fix, and capable of launching within minutes of arriving at a firing point. Pink Panther patrols reported suspected launcher positions. Airstrikes followed. Battle damage assessment was often inconclusive, but the Scud launch rate from western Iraq dropped sharply in the final 4 weeks of the war. Whether that was due to SAS interdiction, air campaign attrition, or Iraqi caution remains debated. What is not debated is that the Pink Panthers survived. Across 6 weeks of operations behind enemy lines, no SAS Pink Panther patrol lost a vehicle to enemy action. Several were damaged. None were destroyed. None were captured. When the war ended on February 28, 1991, the vehicles drove back across the Saudi border under their own power. The Pink Panther was not the most advanced vehicle in Desert Storm. American Humvees carried better radios, better armor, better engines. British Challengers had infinitely more protection. But the Pink Panther had something neither possessed. It had range without logistics, it had firepower without signature, and it had a paint scheme that turned the human eye's own biology against it. In the years after Desert Storm, the Pink Panther became a legend inside the special operations community and largely unknown outside it. The vehicles were not mass-produced. They were not exported. The SAS used them again in Afghanistan in 2001, in different terrain under different conditions, where the pink paint was replaced with desert tan. Some vehicles were converted to the Land Rover Defender WMEAK, the Weapons Mount Installation Kit, a more standardized configuration that entered wider British Army service. But the original Pink Panthers, the Desert Storm configuration, were mostly retired. A few survive. The Land Rover factory at Solihull restored one example to running condition for the Dunsfold collection. The vehicle sits in a private museum, still painted pink, still carrying the scars of 6 weeks in the Iraqi desert, in a warehouse at SAS headquarters in Hereford. Another example is stored as a training reference. Crews preparing for desert operations are shown the vehicle and told the same thing their predecessors were told in 1991. Light vehicles survive where heavy vehicles are destroyed. Mobility is protection, and camouflage is not about hiding, it is about context. January 22, 1991, 3 Land Rovers painted pink roll across the Iraqi desert toward a communications facility that does not know they are there. They look wrong. They look impossible. Every military textbook says a light vehicle painted a bright color in open terrain is a target waiting to die. And yet in the golden hour before sunset, when the desert turns rose and salmon and pale orange, they are invisible. Not because they cannot be seen, but because the human brain, looking at a landscape of pink sand under a pink sky, cannot separate the vehicle from the terrain until it is too late. The SAS understood something that no procurement committee ever did. The best camouflage is not the one that matches every condition. It is the one that matches the condition where you fight. The Pink Panther was not designed to be invisible at noon. It was designed to kill at dawn. And for 6 weeks in early 1991, it did exactly that.